Abandoned at 13 for her pregnancy. This frontier girl's 14-year journey will leave you amazed. Clara Miller stood on the ridge overlooking the Montana Valley, her heart twisting with a sense of foreboding. The wild landscape, once a source of inspiration, felt more like a prison now that she carried a secret that could shatter her fragile world. At 13, she had dreamed of healing, of following in her mother's footsteps and learning the ways of medicine in a community where respect and fear intertwined like the roots of the sturdy pines. But no one could know the truth. She was pregnant. The realization hung heavy around her, like a storm cloud ready to burst. What would they all say? She could already hear the whispers swarm around her like angry bees, each buzz a sharp reminder of her shame. Clara often replayed the terrible moment of discovery in her mind, the sense of betrayal from her own family feeling like knives against her heart. They had turned their backs in an instant, abandoning her to the judgment of a town that thrived on scorn. Would they ever understand the truth of her circumstances, or was she doomed to be labeled a fallen girl forever? The prospect of facing the community's disdain tightened her chest, urging her to flee from the shame that clawed at her insides. Just as despair began to devour her, a flicker of hope arrived in Maud, the town's elderly midwife. With wrinkled hands, she transformed Clara's shame into compassion, showing her the functions of leaves and roots, the healing wonders of nature. Together, they nurtured a small herbal garden behind Maud's dusty cottage, where the young girl poured her heart into learning amidst the towering pines framing her new existence. Yet even as she immersed herself in this ancient trade, Clara felt the undercurrent of gossip that flowed through the town. Each friendly smile concealed the unspoken judgments, each fleeting glance a reminder of her transgressions. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. As Clara began establishing herself, the weight of her past loomed like dark clouds overhead, threatening to engulf her newfound confidence. She often heard the hushed conversations in the market, the wary glances thrown her way like stones. An illness spread through the town, striking a child down with fever and despair, and suddenly everyone looked to her for help.
But the thought of being discovered, of the shame she had worked so hard to bury being pulled back to the surface, made her stomach churn with dread. In the eye of this storm, as she navigated whispers and suspicion, a familiar figure from her past emerged, someone who had once known her joy and innocence. Clara grappled with her emotions, torn between loyalty to her family who had abandoned her and the newfound strength she was cultivating as a healer. Would she rise from the ashes of her past, or would the secrets that darkened her history continue to plague her? As each day unfolded, Clara felt the pressure build like a dam nearing its breaking point. She realized she stood on a precipice, with her future bending precariously in the balance. The truth of her worth and identity no longer felt like an option. It had become a necessity she fought desperately to claim. Would she find the courage to confront her past, or let it suffocate her dreams? The answers eluded her as the town stirred with anticipation, and Clara stood on the brink of a decision that could either forge her legacy or undo her entirely. The following morning, Clara rose early, the golden light of dawn shimmering over the valley like a promise. She could hear the sounds of the town waking, a rooster crowing, the faint clatter of hooves on dirt roads, the distant laughter of children playing outside. Yet deep inside she felt anything but joyful. Today was to be pivotal. The sick child in town was worsening, and Clara had just been summoned to assist. Clara had prepared for such a moment, yet trepidation coursed through her veins like wildfire. What if the townsfolk recognized her shameful past when they saw her tending to their loved ones? The shame she had attempted to anchor deep within her bubbled to the surface, threatening to overshadow her resolve to become a healer. But as she took a deep breath, the scent of the earthy herbs from Maud's garden filled her lungs, grounding her in the purpose she had embraced. With her heart pounding, Clara stepped towards the small wooden house of the sick child, a lass no older than 5, bedridden with fever. The sight of her pale, fragile form struck a chord in Clara. It stirred memories of her own vulnerability and desperation. The girl's mother, a woman Clara recognized from market days, looked at her with a glimmer of suspicion mixed with desperation. The fear of judgment coiled tightly in Clara's chest, yet she pushed through. She was no longer the girl abandoned. She was a healer now. Gathering her awareness, Clara focused on the child's needs, instinctively reaching for her pouch filled with herbs. She suddenly felt a surge of determination wash over her. Each leaf she sorted carried her knowledge, transformed from insecurity to power. She had learned to heal. Carefully, she prepared a concoction of feverfew and willow bark, explaining gently to the mother how it would bring the girl's temperature down. The mother's acceptance, despite her initial hesitance, provided Clara the validation she craved. As hours passed, Clara immersed herself in the essence of healing. She needed to silence the self-doubt that whispered insidiously. The more she engaged, the more she recognized the silent exchanges happening around her, the grateful glances from the mother, the way the child instinctively relaxed under Clara's touch. Every minute in that small room chipped away at her fears, replacing them with a burgeoning sense of identity. But as the evening sun dipped low, the bitterness of her past lingered at the edges of her thoughts. Rumors buzzed outside her temporary haven, and she could sense the shift in the air as whispers about her parentage circulated. It dawned on her that healing was not only about herbs and roots. It was also about confronting the truth of who she was and how she was perceived. Back in her own solitude, she could feel the weight of the world pressing down again. Her mind wrestled with mixed emotions. Clara had begun to carve out a place for herself, yet the shadow of her former life loomed, a stark reminder of the tumultuous path she traversed. Courage surged within her. It was now time to reclaim her narrative. The decision to confront the townsfolk was real, and Clara began crafting her response, weighing the ramifications against the possibility of acceptance or ridicule. Tomorrow, they would see her not as Clara the fallen girl, but Clara the healer. Would the acceptance of her role as a healer fortify her to confront her tarnished past head-on, or would it collapse under the weight of the townsfolk's scrutiny? The sun set behind the hills, leaving her engulfed in twilight, yet a flicker of hope ignited within her heart, a light ready to be unleashed. The moment was approaching. She would face them, truth in hand. Would they be able to see her for who she truly was? As dawn broke the next day, Clara felt an unfamiliar calm replacing the trepidation from before. The light filtered into her modest room, warming her skin and illuminating her path forward. Today was not merely about tending to the sick child. Today was about claiming her identity. She sorted through her herbs with steady hands, reflecting on the journey that had shaped her. The whispers of doubt still clung to her, like an unwelcome shadow. But as she mulled over her purpose, one thing became certain. She possessed formidable knowledge and skills. Clara had learned more than just healing. She had drawn strength from her past, transforming pain into purpose. With each herb she meticulously prepared, she felt her confidence mounting, fortifying her against potential judgment. After a quick breakfast, Clara set out toward the town square, the weight of her decision pressing upon her. Despite the morning bustle, her heart raced. She could see faces familiar yet distant, and she feared. A sudden image of their scorn filled her mind. But the warmth radiating within her provided a protective barrier against their stares. She was no longer the girl everyone whispered about. She was a healer. Each step reinforced her determination, bolstered by the sacred bond she felt with those she aimed to help. The townsfolk congregated, eager to exchange news and share stories. Clara approached, heart pounding, as conversations ebbed to a hush. Murmurs began to circulate. They hadn't expected her today, especially after the rumors spread like wildfire. She took a deep breath, ready to confront them, but hesitation haunted the edges of her courage. A sudden bout of bravery surged through her as she recalled the girl's mother's acceptance, the trust she had earned just hours before. Clara raised her voice, projecting conviction. "I know there are questions about my past, about where I come from, but I stand here today to affirm that I am not defined by my history. I am defined by how I choose to live now." Surprised glances shifted to interest, igniting a spark within her. Clara pressed on. "I am sharing my knowledge as a healer, hoping to alleviate suffering. Healing is not a privilege reserved for the pure of heart. It is a sacred responsibility that grows from understanding pain. With each word, she felt the townsfolk's scrutiny morph into curiosity, and for the first time, she could see the contours of acceptance begin to form. Yet in the back of her mind, a gnawing worry simmered. Would they ever truly see her? They might accept her words, but would they ever forget the girl who bore the scars of stigma? Honest vulnerability emerged as she spoke of choices, her own struggles, and the weight of expectation. We all carry burdens, but it is in sharing these burdens that we find our strength. I may have faltered when young, but I have risen as a healer, and I seek your support as I learn to navigate this path. Questions arose, concerned inquiries about her methods and experience. It was a duel of sorts, yet beneath their scrutiny, Clara sensed a palpable shift. The room filled not only with apprehension, but also an inkling of hope. They were challenging her, forcing her to confront her own fears in real time, propelling her growth. And then, in the residual silence that followed her declaration, she felt it, the flicker of validation. They were wrestling with her past, but were also weighing the authenticity of her present. Suddenly, Clara realized that the confrontation she needed was not merely with the townspeople, but with herself. In that charged moment, Clara understood. Their acceptance was not the crux of her journey. Rather, it was her courage to stand and speak her truth. Each word sliced through her lingering shame, reinforcing her sense of self as a healer. As she prepared to leave, her heart swelled with a mix of relief and anticipation. But as she turned to exit, a familiar figure from her past lurked at the edge of her periphery.
Clara froze. An unsettling feeling washed over her. The time had come to confront not just the townsfolk, but the unresolved threads of her past, her mother, the whispers, and the shame she had yet to fully shed. The air thickened with uncertainty as Clara faced the door, determination coiling within. Would this connection bridge her past and present, leading her toward growth, or would it ultimately unravel the fragile acceptance she had begun to forge? The darkness of the unknown loomed ahead, beckoning her to confront it head first. Clara stepped out into the open air, her heart pounding as the familiar figure took shape. It was her mother, the woman whose absence had been a gaping hole in Clara's life. The memories of betrayal and bitterness rushed to the forefront of her mind, and as her mother's eyes met hers, 1,000 unspoken words hung between them. This was not merely a chance encounter, it was a confrontation long overdue. "Clara," her mother's voice was tentative, carrying both remorse and a lingering authority that Clara struggled to reconcile. Could she possibly understand the impact of her abandonment on Clara's life? It felt impossible to imagine. The years of silence and absence morphed into sharp jabs of anger within Clara, but beneath that anger, there was a flicker of something else, curiosity. "Why are you here?" Clara asked, each word simmering with urgency. What did her mother want? Was this an attempt at redemption, or merely an intrusion on the fragile life Clara was beginning to build? I've heard things, Clara. People say you've become a healer. I wanted to see for myself," her mother replied, eyes darting nervously to the ground. The weight of Clara's past hung in the air, and for the first time she saw her mother not as a villain, but as a person who too had failed. Clara's resolve strengthened as she studied her mother's demeanor. This wasn't the powerful figure she remembered from her childhood. This was a woman worn by her own burdens. Yet she couldn't allow the weight of her mother's sadness to soften the edge of her own. "You made choices that damaged my life. I spent too many years feeling like I wasn't worthy of anything better," she asserted, voice steady, though her insides churned. A flicker of pain crossed her mother's face. "I was scared, Clara. I thought leaving would protect you from the shame. I see now how wrong I was," she said, her voice caught between tears and regret. "Please, just let me explain." Clara's gut twisted. Did she want to hear an explanation? Maybe part of her did, but the echo of disappointment was louder. This was the woman who had chosen to abandon her, and yet here she stood, asking for understanding. "I'm not a child anymore. You can't just walk back into my life and think everything can be different." Clara's heart raced with the duality of anger and a deep-seated longing for a mother, an emotional conflict that propelled her toward a realization.
As a healer, she understood that to care for others often meant caring for oneself, confronting past traumas head-on. If she ever wanted to move forward, she would need to confront this part of her story, to untangle the roots of pain that still entwined her heart. "I can't promise you anything," she started, her voice softer yet resolute. But if you truly want to support me, you need to first understand the depths of what your absence meant. It was a dangerous game, risking old wounds being reopened, but Clara knew the risk was worth it. She needed to reclaim her narrative, and that demanded not only independence from her past, but also an integrated understanding of it. As her mother stepped closer, Clara felt a mixture of frustration and vulnerability. The heaviness of the confrontation loomed, bringing the promise of conversations that could either fracture or forge a new bond. "So, now what?" Clara challenged, anticipating an answer that would not satisfy in a simple way. The answer hung heavy in the air, each breath silencing the cacophony of fears that both women held. Clara stood at the precipice, knowing she was ready to engage in a dialogue that could change everything, if only she could brave the depths of her unresolved feelings. The question now was not what her mother would say, but what Clara was willing to accept about her past and the woman before her. What revelations lay wrapped in the fabric of this long-avoided conversation, and how deeply would they reach into Clara's radically evolving identity? Clara's silence stretched, her mother's expectant gaze urging her to choose a path, a first step in this inevitable dance of confrontation. The air around them was thick with years of unresolved grief and tension, but Clara was no longer afraid to tread those turbulent waters. "Do you want to know how I feel?" Clara finally asked, challenging her own apprehensions. She could almost sense the stakes rising. "You talk about shame as if it was the ultimate excuse, but do you understand the depth of unhappiness your absence carved into my life?" Her mother recoiled slightly, a flinch that Clara noted, not with satisfaction, but with the realization that perhaps this conversation forced them both to examine the truths they'd buried. "I didn't see it that way," her mother began, but Clara's voice interrupted, louder now, fueled by years of pent-up emotion. "Exactly, you didn't see it," Clara declared, her heart racing with a mix of anger and the exhilaration that comes from reclaiming one's voice. "You left me alone at a time when I needed guidance the most. It wasn't just about you leaving, it was about the endless questioning that followed. Was I not enough? What was wrong with me?" The vulnerability in Clara's voice cracked the steely veneer around her mother, revealing a woman grappling with more than just the consequences of her decisions. She was wrestling with her own demons.
Clara had spent too long mired in resentment, and today she felt the tremors of healing beginning to overtake desolation. "I've spent years trying to find my worth outside of your absence," Clara continued, her resolve unwavering. "And now, as a healer, I've learned to guide others through their pain, yet here I am, still retracing my own steps." Her mother swallowed hard, clearly moved. "I wish I could take it back, Clara. I can't explain the fragility of my choices, but I can't deny the truth of your pain either." A deep sigh escaped Clara. The confession hung in the air, shaping the dialogue's trajectory. She noticed how her mother's posture relaxed, fingers uncurling as she stepped slightly closer. Perhaps they both needed this moment of connection. "What if I told you that part of me wanted to forgive you?" Clara posed, laying bare layers of her inner conflict. It felt radical yet grounded, invigorating yet terrifying. This admission was freeing. It was both a declaration of independence and an acknowledgement of her need for closure. Her mother's eyes glistened with tears, and Clara felt caught in a web of empathy and childhood grievances. "But forgiveness isn't a free pass," Clara reiterated quickly. "It's an understanding that comes with boundaries. If we're going to do this, we need to confront the past head-on, not just sweep it under the rug." The asking needed clarity. Clara had learned that a healer's journey was not only about mending others, but also about the constant journey within. She needed to confront and wrestle with her mother and emerged whole on the other side. "What do you want from me?" Her mother's voice broke softly, alert to how deep this cutting dialogue had become. It was a question poised not only for Clara's benefit, but for their tenuous relationship hung in vacuum. "I want you to see me," Clara responded, as much for herself as for her mother. "I want you to understand the weight of your absence, how it shaped me into what I am today, for better or worse. If I am to reclaim my narrative, I cannot do so without addressing yours too." With every word, Clara felt the call for truth echoing within her, a clarion that invited authenticity. The challenge had transformed from a confrontation into a negotiation of past and future acknowledgments. They were two women, no longer simply a mother and daughter, two warriors compelled to forge new connections through their shared pain.
As her mother took a deep breath, Clara sensed the shifting currents around them, a remnant of the past melding with an uncertain future. Would this conversation finally ignite the healing they both desperately needed, or would it fracture any hope of reconnection? The answers danced just out of reach, each woman holding on to pieces of a narrative still unwritten. Clara's heart pounded with the urgency to uncover deeper truths. What were the layers of their shared history yet to be uncovered?
And was this the beginning of a new chapter, or the stage for further heartbreak? As the conversation intensified, she was determined to navigate wherever it might lead, opening pathways to not only healing, but perhaps to profound transformation. The weight of uncertainty lingered, but the air hummed with potential. The time had come to face the past, and Clara felt the thrilling tremors of her evolving strength, an invitation to explore. What if the confrontation was only the beginning of a much larger journey into self-discovery and reformation? The moment hung in the air, taut with the unspoken words that were yet to surface. Clara examined her mother's face, a canvas of remorse and vulnerability, reflecting a lifetime of challenges. The redemptive possibility of understanding flickered in Clara's mind, and as the silence deepened, she resolved to navigate this emotional minefield with determination. "Mom," Clara began, choosing her words carefully, "I think pain and pride have entrenched us, but love, it's what can legitimately stitch our wounds together." Hearing her own words out loud astonished her, the gravity of their truth becoming a revelation. It shattered the relentless cycle of hurt they had spun around each other. "What would it take for you to see beyond your regrets?" Her mother's gaze lowered, as if ashamed of the years lost to her own pride. "To undress those regrets feels like admitting defeat. I always thought I was protecting you by staying away, that my presence would only make things worse," her mother whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of disclosure. Clara's heart ached at hearing this. It served as a glaring reminder of how judgments, no matter how well-intentioned, could inflict wounds far deeper than physical separation. "What if your absence wasn't a shield but a source of my struggle?" Clara leaned in, searching for the connection they both craved. "Have you ever allowed yourself to feel that I've missed you, that every day I instinctively wanted a mother's embrace during pivotal moments?" The words hung, resonating in the space between them. Clara watched her mother wrestle with an agonizing truth, the understanding that such well-meaning choices could create chasms of misunderstanding. I can accept that now," her mother managed, her tone suffused with a newfound insight. "But can you tell me what I can do to change this?" The challenge of creating tangible change now danced before Clara, becoming a tangible lifeline. This was her moment, not just of recognition, but of power. "You could start by truly listening," she urged, feeling emboldened. "Take steps to understand my world, show interest in my life, my work, my failures." Her mother nodded slowly, processing the weight of responsibility. I need your guidance through this." It was a candid admission, a striking turn from the defensiveness that had provided them both a false sense of security for so long. "Then we begin anew," Clara affirmed, her voice steady. "Each small act of acknowledgement will be significant. The choice to engage with my life and to face the shadows is all I ask." Embarking on this shared journey was daunting, yet liberating. Clara felt her childhood grievances transform into provisions for their growth. Grief would become an investment in connection rather than a detriment. The time had come to close the distance with authentic healing. As they delved into conversation, Clara marveled at how vulnerability could pave the way to forging resilience. This felt like the first step toward breaking generational chains that had marred their lives. But she also understood that every path has its challenges. Just as this thought crystallized, she sensed a shift. An email notification on her phone, a lingering responsibility from her professional life, blinked ominously. Reminders of her commitments flooded her mind. Could she balance the demands of her career with this personal rebirth? The implications of her emerging relationship with her mother clashed with her professional responsibilities, demanding immediate attention. Clara felt a familiar tightening in her chest. The weight of expectations loomed heavy. The moment hung unevenly around them, filled with hope for a newfound connection, yet shadowed by the uncertainty of real-world implications. In reclaiming her narrative, would she risk losing other facets pivotal to her evolving self? What if the world she had cultivated as a healer would unravel at a time she needed it most? The flickering tension cast a new light on her journey of self-discovery, and she knew the coming days would challenge her in ways she had yet to fathom. Which parts of her identity had she to negotiate as she embraced this growth? Clara took a deep breath, focusing on a single thought. This journey was just beginning, and with it came the necessary courage to confront whatever awaited her. Would she find balance, or would she have to choose one path over another? The answer, like the moment, lingered just out of reach, igniting a sense of urgency and unease within her. How could she reconcile these new layers of her identity without sacrificing the foundations she had painstakingly built?
Clara's heartbeat quickened as she glanced again at her phone. The email from her director was an unwelcome specter, a reminder of the tight deadlines and increasing expectations at work. As she hastily glanced through her messages, each word felt like an anchor pulling her back into the tumult of her professional existence. She was overwhelmed by the sheer weight of her responsibilities, battling the temptation to choose the comfortable predictability of her career over the unfamiliar chaos of rekindling a relationship she had longed for. "Clara?" Her mother's tentative voice broke the silence, pulling Clara back from the precipice of anxiety. "Are you still with me?"
The warmth of her mother's inquiry ignited a flicker of resolve within her. Yes, Clara was still here, but the question loomed larger than ever. Could she truly commit to this familial journey while juggling a career that increasingly demanded more of her than she was willing to give? "I'm trying to navigate everything," Clara began, her hands trembling slightly. "It's just, there are things I have to deal with at work. I don't want to just talk about us and then—" She hesitated, knowing the emotional stakes were growing, "and then ignore my responsibilities." "I understand, work has its demands," her mother said, a hint of empathy in her voice. "But remember, this is also a part of your life, a crucial part. Don't you think it deserves your attention too?" Clara felt a rush of frustration. A deeper concern unfolded within her, spiraling into doubt about her capacity to maintain both spheres of her existence. The very act of extending her personal life toward her mother required a radical shift in how she viewed her professional identity. Could she separate her emotional vulnerabilities from her commitment to healing others? Taking a deep breath, she began to map options in her mind, filling the silence with possibilities. What if I set aside time specifically for us? Maybe a couple of hours each week to catch up and talk. It's not a lot, but it would be a start. Her mother's face lit up with renewed hope, and the brightness of her expression fueled Clara's determination further. "I'd love that, Clara. I really would. It would mean the world to me to spend that time together, to learn more about who you've become." Statements like this created an unexpected urgency. Clara felt a knot of responsibility tighten around her conscience. It wasn't just about making time. It was about validating this relationship, giving voice to the years that had been stolen from them both through misunderstandings and silence. Yet another email pinged, another reminder of the evening's meetings that were long overdue. Burgeoning anxiety screamed for her attention. Clara, in her inward battle, weighed the costs of professional obligation against the gains of mending her relationship. She knew she had the capacity for both, but could she manage to preserve her own mental and emotional health amidst this turmoil? "I can take that leap," she whispered, mostly to herself. As she felt the weight of self-doubt dissolve slightly, her mother's gaze softened, an understanding radiating from her that Clara had craved for years. "See, you're already taking control. You can do this." Clara nodded slowly, reflecting on the tense balance she needed to master. It would require deft negotiation, not just with her professional commitments, but also with the emerging revelations of her relationship with her mother.
Each discussion, every step taken towards healing, would demand courage, a willingness to confront her fears layer by layer. And yet, hovering uncertainties loomed large. As Clara leaned into this emerging identity, she felt the weight of expectations from both her professional world and her personal world pressing in. The reality that she had to manage these different dimensions of herself loomed ominously. What other sacrifices would this journey demand? Would stepping into her personal story mean compromising the progress she had made professionally? The intricacies of balancing love and work wove heavier threads into the tapestry of her existence, and she felt herself holding her breath, waiting for the moment when clarity would surface amidst the chaos. With her mother watching, Clara realized the path ahead extended beyond just past grievances. This was a journey towards defining who she would become. Each step she took now would bring her closer to reclaiming her narrative, but uncertainty still tangled at the edges of her resolve. She braced herself as the shadows of potential choices loomed ahead. The conference call she would later face remained an unsettling shadow, further challenging her sense of self. Would she find a way to embrace the calling to mend her fractured life, or would the weight of responsibility pull her away before she had truly begun? The tension coiled tightly around her, ready for the next push toward discovery. Clara paced her small home office, the soft hum of the city reverberating through the window. She felt the weight of forthcoming decisions pressing against her temples. With every step, the divide between her personal aspirations and professional obligations felt less like a fork in the road and more like an inescapable chasm. She glanced at her laptop, the screen illuminating the barrage of messages, a collage of urgent tasks and pressing deadlines. Should she cancel the evening's meeting? The thought crept in uninvited. It was a necessary discussion for the upcoming project,
but a sudden longing to embrace the new timetable she envisioned with her mother washed over her. Yet, would her team understand? Would they view her as unreliable, someone unable to handle the pressure? Just the idea of disappointing her colleagues prickled her skin. Determined, Clara opened her calendar and began to carve out time. A weekly 2-hour slot for her mother immediately bloomed beneath the clutter of deadlines. As she input the time into her electronic planner, she felt a surge of empowerment swell within her. It was a small act, but a significant statement punctuated with defiance against her current anxieties. The knot of guilt loosened, if ever so slightly. But with each keystroke came flashbacks of team meetings, where her contributions, pivotal as they were, often felt overshadowed by more assertive colleagues.
There was Michael, who would take the lead with surprising ease, and Jenna, whose confidence transcended the time-honored rules of their industry. Clara had always been competent. It was the shine of that competence, she mused, that often dulled in the face of brashness. She needed to confront these long-standing feelings of inadequacy head-on. "Maybe I need to lean into that," she whispered aloud, as if articulating the thought would give it power. Perhaps not just conceding to overwhelming expectations, but claiming space was part of her evolution. I can speak up, standing my ground while still maintaining my commitments. The thought of asserting herself tugged at her resolve, invigorating a part of her she had tucked away for too long. She recalled her director emphasizing the importance of leadership in their last meeting. Clara had absorbed the lecture but withheld her opinions, preferring the certainty of observing over engaging. Tonight's call could be different. Resolutely, she lifted her chin, deciding that when the moment came, she would voice her ideas with intention. She envisioned a scenario where she confidently presented her views and delegated tasks with a newfound assertiveness. Could her colleagues' perceptions of her alter? Would they see her more as a risk-taker than just a translator of tasks and strategies? Rubbing the tension from her neck, Clara leaned back in her chair, her mind whirling with the potential of this dual focus on personal and professional life. But the specter of doubt mirrored her ambition. What risk was she willing to take on both fronts? Would her colleagues accept shifts in the established dynamics? And could she balance the shift without losing herself in an emotional descent back into her past? Her phone buzzed yet again, another reminder of the pressing conference call. As she stood to ready herself, she realized that the challenge ahead would be fraught with unexpected revelations, not just of her professional persona, but of her abiding connection with her mother and the choices they both had made. Clara stepped toward the mirror, needing reflection, both in the face looking back and in the weight of the decisions that colored the life behind her. This was no ordinary meeting. It marked the beginning of her reclaiming her narrative, a shift driven by both the necessity of growth and the whispered encouragement of what it means to dare, to face her fears, and in doing so, reimagine who she could become. As she prepared to dial in, a question echoed in the back of her mind. How far could she shape her narrative before the weight of her past intertwined with this new assertion? Clara pressed her lips together and steadied her breath, ready to confront the mix of excitement and fear that swirled within. The moment of truth awaited her, not just in that conference room, but across the bridge of reconciliation that now lay between her and her mother. What truths awaited her there, and how would they echo in her professional life? The conference call started promptly, the chirpy voice of their team leader cutting through the tension in Clara's chest. As her colleagues greeted one another, she could feel the weight of the room press against her. Logging in felt like stepping onto a stage, the spotlight illuminating her insecurities as she prepared to share her thoughts. Clara listed the agenda items in her mind, but her focus wavered on the clock. Time seemed to bend, stretching out painfully, each tick amplifying her hesitation. Should she dive right in? Would it be too bold to speak first? She had always been one to follow, to support, but tonight held new significance. The weight of her commitment to both her professional domain and her personal life surged to the forefront. "Are we ready to begin?" Michael piped up, his tone confident, as if he had already taken the lead. Clara felt the knot in her stomach tighten. She exchanged glances at the faces appearing on screen, some engaged, others distractedly fiddling with their devices. Her confidence wavered, but she remembered those final moments of preparation in front of the mirror. This is her time. And although her mind swirled with thoughts of personal and professional aspirations colliding, she realized they could actually intertwine into something stronger. With a deep breath, Clara found her voice. "I have some ideas for how we can approach the project. I believe there might be opportunities for us to streamline communication and enhance our workflow." Silence followed, and Clara felt the heat rise to her cheeks. Had she spoken too soon? But instead of retreating, she pressed on. She outlined her suggestions clearly, watching the faces of her colleagues as they transitioned from mild curiosity to engaged interest. Jenna leaned in, nodding. "That's a great perspective, Clara.
I also think breaking it down into smaller tasks could help us overcome the overwhelm. Encouraged by Jenna's support, Clara gained momentum. Sharing ideas became less daunting as she responded to her colleagues' questions and incorporated their thoughts into her proposals. The initial uncertainty transformed into a genuine conversation about collaboration and progress. Each word she spoke chipped away at her old self, the one lingering in the shadows of her mind. As the call wrapped up, Michael gave her an appreciative nod. "Great insights, Clara. I didn't realize you had such solid strategies in mind." For a moment, she felt as if she were floating, each compliment a buoy against her fears. Small victories, she reminded herself. Feedback like this only fueled her hunger for growth, for ascending the ladder on her terms, not dictated by anyone else's perception of her abilities. But as she ended the call, her thoughts danced back to her mother and the 2-hour slot now scheduled weekly.
Should she bring the new energy from her work home, or would it falter under the weight of familial expectations? Was she equipped to balance her professional breakthroughs with her mother's historical expectations? The anxiety crept in again. Deep-seated fears of falling short of her mother's hopes clashed with the burgeoning independence she felt in her professional life. Clara stood at the crossroads once more, each path lined with question marks. The decision loomed. Should she navigate her professional growth in tandem with confronting her mother's memories, or compartmentalize them, shielding one from the other? Trusting that she had strengthened her narrative at work seemed easier than confronting the unresolved tensions at home. Determined, she reached for her phone, intent on calling her mother. Unfurling the threads of her past felt daunting, but she'd taken a step professionally tonight. Maybe it was time to assert herself in her personal life, too. As the phone rang, anticipation fluttered in her chest. Would her mother appreciate the new Clara, or would she be met with resistance? The voice on the other end would not only answer that question, but might even compel Clara toward the self-acceptance she had been inching toward. With each ring, the possibilities danced before her. Would this encounter mark a new chapter in their relationship, or was she merely setting herself up for disappointment? Either way, the journey of self-discovery awaited her, and Clara felt ready to explore the uncharted territory between vulnerability and strength. What complexities would unfold in this conversation that could determine her next steps? Clara took a deep breath, steadying herself as her mother's familiar voice broke through the static of uncertainty. "Clara, are you there?" There was a serenity in her tone that cut through the tension, igniting a buoy of hope in Clara's chest. "Yes, Mom," Clara replied, her heart racing with anticipation. "I wanted to talk about what we discussed earlier, about our time together and what it means moving forward." It felt liberating to assert her intentions, yet an undercurrent of anxiety surged. Could they navigate the complexities of their shared history while forging new connections? "I'd love that," her mother said, but Clara felt how her voice trembled, laden with both excitement and trepidation. "I want this chance to understand you better." Clara swallowed hard as she began to outline ideas to engage not only with her mother on their personal history, but also to incorporate this renewed connection into her life as a healer. "You know, my journey as a healer has reshaped how I view relationships. It's about learning to listen, heal, and grow together." "Clara, I know I haven't done that for you," her mother interrupted softly, a thread of vulnerability woven into her words. "But I am ready to learn now." Hearing those words stirred something within Clara, a mixture of hope and cautious optimism. "I know it will take time," Clara replied. "It's not just about making time for each other, but about being honest with our stories, sharing the parts that shaped who we are." "Agreed," her mother whispered, the conviction in her voice mingling with earnestness. "I understand if you hold resentment, but I want to meet you, wherever you are." Clara felt the weight of her mother's acknowledgement settling like a comforting blanket around her heart. Their conversation began to unfurl a tapestry of connection, one threaded with shared experiences and braided with newfound understandings. She envisioned moments spent together, exchanging the hidden nuances of their lives as they peeled back layers of their shared history. Yet the prospect of diving deeper filled her with uncertainty. Clara was determined to embrace the fullness of her identity as a healer while reconnecting with the woman who chose to abandon her. "I'm still working on forgiving you, Mom," she admitted, forthrightly, "but I think the first step is creating a safe space to address our pain." In the pause that followed, an understanding passed between them. It was time to begin dismantling the walls erected over years of silence and neglect. "I want to help," her mother said resolutely. "Although I can't change the past, I want to be the bridge now between the Clara I left and the one you've become." It was a powerful declaration. Clara felt the urgency within her pulse. Her mother was beginning to grasp the essence of her healing journey.
the importance of nurturing and trusting the bonds of love. It echoed Clara's intention of becoming a healer, not only for her patients, but also for herself and her own fragmented history. "Let's cultivate this together," Clara proposed. "We can share our stories, yours from the past, mine from now, as we figure out how to move forward." "I'd like that, Clara. I'm committed to making this work," her mother replied, a bittersweet ache lacing her words. "I want to acknowledge your journey, your resilience." Clara's heart swelled. Acceptance blossomed within her, stirring threads of forgiveness that had long remained frayed. "I'll need your support too," she continued, the burden of her early fears slowly lifting. "As I increase my identity outside of this conversation, with my work, I want to be both a daughter and a healer." The promise she had made to take risk with her professional life echoed through their dialogue, igniting the conviction to balance her narrative seamlessly. Clara envisioned embodying herself fully in both realms of her life, anchoring her emotional foundations without letting either space go unnoticed. "Together, we can navigate both of our worlds," her mother responded, a final note of resolve coloring her voice. "I'm ready for the challenges ahead." As warmth enveloped Clara, she felt like a phoenix rising from the ashes of her past.
She was emerging with clarity, a strength acquired not just through her healing dreams, but from engaging in the tough conversations that lay ahead. She began to visualize the fortified bond that could surround them once the fragments were woven together, mother and daughter, both transformed by time and vulnerability. "Then it's settled," Clara affirmed. "Let's start our shared journey of healing." Each subsequent word wrapped around them, solidifying a new commitment, an unspoken pact to face whatever challenges would unfold. As she hung up, a flush of triumph washed over her. She no longer stood at the precipice of uncertainty. Clara had decided to confront her past without letting it define her, transforming pain into purpose while nurturing the strongest, most honest connection she had long yearned for. She felt the echoes of her professional growth intertwine with her personal journey, a balance emerging between the two worlds. Through every whispered conversation, Clara realized that she would heal more profoundly, allowing the layers of trust between herself and her mother to blossom as powerfully as Maud's garden. With this new resolution, Clara left her office, confident and fortified. The horizon was a spectrum of possibility, each color representing paths yet to be taken. She was ready to embrace the transformative journey ahead, walking hand in hand with her past and present. A new legacy awaited in the restoration of their bond, and she would weave it with the threads of resilience and love. Now Clara was ready to step forth, an empowered healer and a daughter reclaiming both her narrative and her identity, victorious in conquering what had once threatened to hold her back. Remember, true change takes courage, and you need to celebrate every step of your journey too. Don't wait even one more second to share your thoughts about this transformative conclusion. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Clara's journey. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Let's spread the inspiration together.